We are in a class which we call Inquiry, but it's an introduction to the discipline of theology. And theology is an invention of the church. It is a discipline, an academic discipline, with its own rules of methodology. So, theology explores religious experience. That's what theology is designed to do. Now, there are other cultures and other religions that have done this, but theology, as we understand it as moderns, this is the way it came into existence. The gospel message of Jesus, which is essentially, if not completely Jewish, then encounters the Greek world. And it's a collision of two cultures. And so there's the way the Hebrews thought and the Jews thought, and there's the way the Greeks thought. When we think about ancient peoples, we think of like the ancient Egyptians. And they were marvelous engineers and constructed the pyramids. And that's their legacy they leave behind. And we are impressed, and well, we should be. And the ancient Romans left behind an organized society called the empire with infrastructure, roads and bridges, and they built the finest military machine the world had ever seen. And they built an empire, a society around the Mediterranean, so that the Mediterranean Sea was called a Roman lake. Mm. They dominated that whole area of human civilization, and they ruled for 1,000 years. No small accomplishment. And part of the legacy of the Roman Empire is still with us today, the Roman Catholic Church. That's the official church of the Roman Empire. So in terms of sheer size and historical durability, no one can beat the Roman Catholic Church. It's huge. So it's quite an amazing human phenomenon. It is larger than any governmental organization or any government. The Roman Catholic Church is a global human organization, is the biggest in the world. Quite amazing, and in such a short time, really. So the Romans left us their great organizational ability, where they could build an empire, and when they embraced Christianity, it is often said that it wasn't Christianity that converted the empire, but the empire that converted Christianity and made it useful for their political purposes, which has been going on for centuries now. Nothing new with that. So the Romans gave us organization and military skill. They gave us the concept of law, that society is to be ruled by laws. This is all a Roman idea. It's a tremendous contribution. The Egyptians left us tombs for the dead. The Romans left us an entire civilized society to live. And the Greeks left us philosophy and art. They like to think that they were interested in beauty and culture. And the Romans adored the Greeks and loved Greek culture better than their own. And so they wanted to do everything Greek. Greek art, Greek ideas. And finally, by the time we come to the 1st century, the Romans decided to speak Greek. That became the official language of the empire, not Latin. Latin was the native tongue of the Romans, but they made Greek the language of the empire. So you can see these ancient cultures all contributed something. And so there was a collision between the Hebraic culture through the Jews, the preaching of Paul and the apostles and Jesus, with the Greek culture, which was well established and sophisticated. The Greeks were so elitist that they referred to everyone else as barbarians. Everybody. Even the Romans were barbarians to the Greeks. And certainly the Jews were barbarians with all their strange customs. But the collision of these two worlds, Hellenistic culture with the Greeks and Hebraic biblical culture in the expansion of the Christian church with the movement of Jesus spilling out into the world culture. It was very parochial. You know what I mean by parochial? Christianity was limited to a particular population in ancient Israel. And it didn't expand much beyond that until the Apostle Paul came and changed everything. And so Christianity becomes what is a small sect of Judaism, because it is Judaism. It becomes a world religion standing on its own. It's really quite a remarkable story that this happened. But this collision of Hebraic, what's the big contribution of the Hebrews? Well, they made several contributions to civilization, but the greatest contribution of the Hebrew culture and of the Jews is their storytelling. The story of the prophets. You know, all these great epic stories, and they wrote them down. So the great cultural contribution of the Hebrews was the Bible and their history, their storytelling. And it is from this ethnic group that Jesus of Nazareth emerges. So the Greeks recognized their indebtedness to the Jews, but they also recognized they were different. And the Greeks had a different interest than the Jews. Jews were more or less interested in their relationship with Yahweh and the Torah. The Greeks were interested in knowing what was the common reality that we can depend on that undergirds all of the environment, all of the world. So when we do theology, we're doing something that is very Greek, but we're also doing something that's very Jewish, because theology is a discipline that emerges from the collision of these two traditions, the Greek and the Jewish tradition. That's where theology comes from. I explained this one time in an essay I was writing, I posted on the internet, and someone says, well, that's not fair to other religions. Don't other religions have theology? Well, other religions think about religion. So I guess you could say because they have thoughts and philosophy, they have theology. But I'm speaking of theology as a particular discipline as it emerged in Western civilization. And as such, it is the product of these two intellectual traditions of the ancient world, the Hebraic and the Greek. And they come together, and Greek philosophy with the stories of the Bible create theology. And it becomes an irresistibly attractive combination or chemistry. Because Christianity just grew through the Greek and Roman world like a fire. It conquered the empire. It was persuasive and it was meaningful.
Was that because we had a nicer God?
A nicer God? Could be because Christianity had a different vision of what God was like. Because in the pagan Roman world, gods and goddesses were capricious. They didn't care about human beings. You better not cross me or trespass against me, or I'll be angry and pour out curses on your life. So the whole sacrificial system of the paganism in the first century was a way of appeasing deities that weren't interested in your well-being. You just had to appease them. So Christianity comes along with this idea: the God who's behind all of creation is personal and loves. So that was a new concept. We knew about gods and goddesses, but we never knew about a God who was loving and cared about human beings. We knew gods needed to be appeased, But this God just wants us to love each other and to love God. This is a radical idea. We hear it all the time, so it just rolls off of us like water. But it was a radical conception. So I don't have a mean pagan God coming after me with a club that I have to appease somehow. That I actually am attracted to a man who is the Son of God, and that God is a loving, creating God. This was a radical idea for the time. This is what emerges out of the ancient Roman world of Christianity. Anyway, as theology developed, theology wants to categorize everything and give definitions of everything. Now that's what the Greeks like to do. That's an idea from the Greeks. So let's look at our worksheet here.
We need to finish, lesson 1, we had 2 pages that we didn't.
Oh, okay.
Page,
Did I?
page 3 and page 4, and I think I'm probably the only one
You're the only one with the
that
answers.
has the answers,
Okay.
Thanks to me.
thanks to my sister Sharon.
From 5 years
Who's
ago.
So we'll have to
5
go
years
back.
ago.
I'm sorry to have left that out. What page are we?
So,
Page 3 and
It's
4.
page 3 and page 4 of
Okay.
Phenomenon of
Human
religion.
Spirituality, the Phenomenon of Religion.
Oh, we're still there.
We're still there.
I thought we skipped over that.
Well, we did.
we did skip one.
We didn't finish.
So I'm gonna
We
give
have
you
to
the
do it.
right answers, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
So,
you-
Sha-
Do you have those pages, Bishop Peter?
I think I did. I had.
That's page 3. We have an extra copy for you.
Oh, good.
Okay.
yeah, that's different than that.
Okay, page 3. Oh, I did something different.
Okay.
Do you want me to read the answers?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Sure.
Number 1, within the single individual, there are many personas. That is, there are many manifestations of a deeper self or inner consciousness.
Spell that, would you please?
Which word? Consciousness? C-O-
Conscious. CONSCIOUS.
N-E-S-S. Consciousness.
Thank you. Oh, yes.
These, is that okay for everybody? Just slow me down if I go too fast. 2, these multiple manifestations of the self or personas, incidentally, the word persona means a mask,
It does.
Oh, it does?
It's a Latin word.
emanate
Eminent.
from the deeper self and are conditioned by the social cultural environment. Environment. We have many faces. These manifestations in a healthy individual are interconnected. An actor playing out many roles, becoming a role. Okay? Number 3, humanity is a social being.
Being.
B-E-I-N-G, being. A, we realize our interconnectedness with others in our conscious social relationships.
Relationships is the word.
We are aware of the I and thou relationships. B, we have extended our social relationships to include not only other humans, but to all living creatures and even to what we would now call inanimate or non-living beings. Our cars. We humanize or personalize the world. Humanize or personalize goes in the blank. The world.
An example of that is a captain of a ship. he'll refer to the inanimate ship as a person.
She.
Usually it's
We,
she.
yeah, we extend personal attributes. We do the same with our pets. We humanize them. And indeed, the pets cooperate to a certain degree and become humanized.
Well, and we give names to our cars.
What's that?
Indeed.
We name our cars.
Oh, we do. Yeah, we do. What's the name of your car?
I've never
Well,
done
I didn't name her Lola, somebody
Lola.
else did.
Someone else named it car. Lola, and it stuck.
I did. It was funny.
Okay, number 4. Human spirituality is the awareness of this deeper self. Awareness is the word. This inner life, what we sometimes call the soul or spirit. This awareness is a universal human experience. We all have it. We can't imagine something better than the present perceivable reality. Imagine is the word. Oh, and B is a new word that you probably don't know.
It's a technical word.
Yeah, we have a sense of the numinous.
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 Yeah, it's from the Greek word where we get the word spirit from. So the numinous, but this happens frequently. Ever in a room by yourself and you could swear you're not alone?
Yes.
Or you go out and see a beautiful vista and you feel like you're in the presence of someone other?
Yeah.
That's called the numinous. The sense of the numinous, which seems to be a universal human experience.
Yes, a sense of awe, wonder, and
Yeah.
mystery.
Numinous is spelled N-U-M, as in Mary, I-N-U-S?
O-U-S.
O-U-S, okay, the numinous, yeah.
Like luminous, like luminous.
Yeah,
Okay, as a result, we possess a yearning within our deeper self.
yeah, there's a, yearning.
Yearning. And then there's a little bit on the page 4. This yearning enables us to give meaning to our existence. Images, symbols, and language enable us to express and impart meaning.
This yearning for something that is within us is captured in the song by U2. I still haven't found what I'm looking for. Really captures that longing,
That's a good
yearning.
song. That's a good song.
I've tried this and that and this,
Yeah.
still haven't found what I'm looking
Yeah.
for.
And 5, religion is the social expression of this human spirituality within a given cultural group. Social expression within a given cultural group. And finally, we have page 3 and 4 filled in.
Yay.
Oh, good. I'm glad we did that.
I would like to add something
Yeah.
to Bishop Peter's earlier remarks, if you'll let me.
Yeah, please.
Because I would have said the same thing, but probably a little bit differently. And I want to concentrate for just a minute on the Greek language and the fact that the Christian scriptures are written in Greek. The earliest Christians were Jewish Christians, but the writing of their those letters
Yeah.
and the texts of the Gospels are written in Koine Greek, which is the Greek of the ordinary people. And where there's a tremendous interface between Greek culture and Greek language and what goes on in that early Christian community in the 1st century, because because of the fact that they were using the Greek language and philosophical terms were already a part of the Greek language, like at the beginning of John, the word logos, which is used in the prologue of the Gospel of John. They've already got the vocabulary that comes out of early Greek philosophy.
Are they Greek people? Are they Greek?
No,
No.
no, they were Jewish Christians, the
But
first,
they're
the
Jewish
first,
speaking.
But they
First
were,
century.
they function in the Greek culture.
but they spoke Greek, they
Gotcha.
were probably multilingual
Yeah,
and
probably.
spoke Greek. I mean,
That's what it sounds like.
one of the things
Yeah.
that I thought for years and years in the middle of my extreme naivete was that that Galilee was a backwater hill country, you know, where
Mhm.
grass grew on, you know, and that
Yeah.
was sort of it. You know, and that's not true at all.
If
It
they're
was,
able to master one
it was
another
a,
language, that's impressive.
you know,
Yeah.
huge trade routes
Yeah.
went through there.
So it was
and
very cosmopolitan.
it was cosmopolitan, and there were, people had to be multilingual in order to deal with the,
And Greek was what everybody,
and Greek
Yeah, no,
was,
it was
pretty much,
convenient.
yeah.
was
Yeah.
the language that,
Well,
sort of like English.
So
sort of.
Greek-
Yeah,
Yeah,
like here.
it was like that. It was-
Handwriting.
And you can speak Spanish,
Greek-
which happens.
Greek-
It was the language for business.
Exactly.
but Latin was also in writing,
Mhm.
right?
yes,
But Latin never
But
took
not
place.
all
It- it-
languages have a written form.
yeah,
Right.
but Hebrew did, and so,
And Hebrew and Latin and Greek all had written.
That's right.
yes. Now, the other thing that I wanna say, which ties part of what Bishop Peter was getting at in terms of how we go back to Greek philosophy for, in a way, for our theological roots. There are a couple ways that you can go about trying to get at this, but the way I like to get at it is that the Greeks were interested in trying to figure out the nature of being, capital B, being, all that is,
Being.
being.
B-E-I-N-G. Okay,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
being.
Like lima bean.
Or jelly bean.
Or
Yeah.
jelly bean.
Or Mr.
Or
Bean.
Mr. Bean, or lima bean.
That's a good one. Okay.
But capital B,
Mhm.
being, and what is my little b being have to do with big B being, okay, which was explored in any number of ways by those early philosophers. But then if you go to the beginning of Exodus, where Moses has his encounter in the burning bush with this God, and basically Moses is saying, we don't even know who you are. You know, why are you trying to get me to go and lead your people
Like,
out
who are
of
you?
Egypt? We don't even know who you are. And the truth of the matter is, if you, as you read all the way through Genesis, no name of God through Genesis, and then all of a sudden Moses calls him on it, you know.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this to me when we don't even know your name?
Yeah.
And what the voice says back is tell my, I'm paraphrasing, tell my people that I am who I am. So, and if you look at the root in Hebrew of I am who I am, the root is the verb be, being, to be, being, and I think it's pretty easy to tie being as in I am who I am back to capital B being that you
That the
find
Greeks-
in the Greek,
In the Greek, yeah.
in the Greek tradition. So, and they're blended from then on, I mean, clearly blended by those early Christians who are using the Greek language and their access because of the culture to Greek philosophical ideas that then get transmuted and used in the context of the development of Christian theology.
So, what you see is a path, a historical path. It begins among the Palestinian Jews of the first century. Then it invades the Greek culture and changes the Greek culture. But the Greek culture also changes Christianity. And then Christianity moves from the Greek culture to the Latin culture. And that's when the Roman Catholic Church, as we understand it, begins. And then Christianity becomes a European religion through the Latins. It spreads to the Celts and
So
the
the
Germans.
Romans spoke Latin.
The Romans spoke Latin and they learned Greek.
Okay.
And the Greeks missionized the Latins. That's why the New Testament is written in Greek. And the Latins missionized the Celts and the Germans.
And that's
And
why-
so Christianity becomes a European religion.
Religion, yeah. Wow.
Was it Saint Augustine that's said to have mistranslated?
Oh, you're remembering that? Yeah. Well, he was reading a
Back there.
mistranslation.
He didn't speak Greek.
He didn't speak, he was a Latin.
Okay, so, yeah, there you go.
And Roman Catholic Christianity, one of the things that other Christians will point out to Roman Catholics is that Roman Catholicism is very legalistic. Have you ever heard that criticism? Yeah, it has all this canon law and rules and regulations. It's just too legalistic. That's the criticism. But the fact is, that's what the Romans contributed to Christianity. The rule of law.
Yeah.
And so I think it was a real honest endeavor by the Latin fathers to create a Christian society through law. That's what they attempted to do. Well, one of the great Latin fathers, you might have heard his name, was Tertullian. Tertullian became a Christian and he became a bishop in the early church. We're talking about like in the 200s, a long time ago. Anyway, he was a lawyer in the Roman society. So when he heard the gospel and became a believer, he then started to write, explaining the meaning of it. Well, what did he do? He relied upon his education in jurisprudence. And so he brought in all these Roman legal regulations into the life and the thinking of the church. And that man, Tertullian, that Latin, we call him a Latin father, was an influence on the thought of St. Augustine. St. Augustine was an intellectual giant. We can't say enough good about him. I'm in awe of his brain. If you read his book, The Confessions of St. Augustine, you'll think it was written by a modern writer. His insight into human psychology was unprecedented.
When
What was
was
the
it?
name of the book
He
again?
was writing in the 4th and 5th centuries. So we're talking about a long time ago. When you read it, he gives a psychological evaluation of the developmental stages that a child goes through. He already did that in the 4th century.
You said, what was the name of that book again? That you-
The Confessions of St. Augustine. It's a slow read. You take your time. But fortunately, the chapters are short. But it is a classic of Western Christianity. And it informs the conversation of Christians to this very day. Both Roman Catholic and Protestant are dependent upon Augustine. Protestants and Roman Catholics, they don't know it. They see how different we are from each other because we grow up with it. They look so different. But really, we're more similar than we are different. And a lot of our ideas that Protestants and Catholics share come from Augustine. And the Greek Orthodox, they look at us and they say, you're too legalistic. You've been reading Augustine. So the Greek Orthodox looks at the Western Church, both Catholic and Protestant, and says, it's the same thing. They're too legalistic. They see us as still being related.
How do they differ from
Oh, they have a whole different tradition and history. And the emphasis for them is not on rules and regulations, but it's on having a mystical experience.
Much more mystical.
Yeah. So when you go to an Eastern Orthodox liturgy, you feel like you're on drugs or something. All the chanting and the incense and the bells and
I
everything.
was in a Greek wedding and I was exhausted at the
Yeah,
end of
you
it.
would
Everything
be.
was done 3 times.
You had to do everything in
Everything
threes.
is done.
I didn't know if I was
Yeah,
gonna.
that's right.
No, it's true.
Yeah. But it's the oldest, they are celebrating today what is the oldest liturgy in the church now. The liturgy of St. John the Divine. Anyway, I'm getting off the topic. So when we begin the theological enterprise, we look in 2 directions initially. And one of them we talked about last time we were together. We look into what's going on in the interior of the human species. And we were able to make some observations that spiritual experience seems to be universal and common. And it's not just one group of people that have these kinds of experiences. And because we're social beings, we like to share these experiences. So human culture invents religious practice. We've invented it because it's a way of giving meaning to our lives. So religion didn't float down from heaven. It comes out of the human heart and our struggles with life. We're trying to find meaning for life. So religion is a sociological phenomenon. We talked about that. Which is created by culture. So when did religion emerge in the human experience? I suspect, we don't know, I'll just tell you that up front, but I suspect our religious consciousness emerged at the same time of our consciousness emerging. So once we as a species of animals started to become self-conscious and spiritual and have an inner life and reflective and exercising reason and all those things we associate with being human, guess what was one of the first things we did? We invented religion. That came first. And so it's a universal phenomenon. No matter what cultural or language or ethnic group you go to, everybody has a religious tradition. I remember growing up in the 1960s, and Jeannie might remember the 1960s. You know, back in the 1960s, you might remember this, everybody went to church in my neighborhood. The only difference was the church they went to, they go to the Methodists, they go to the Presbyterian, they're Jewish. Those are the Roman Catholics. But everybody went to church. It was something common to the whole culture. Well, Christianity became the dominant influence in late antiquity. That's the latter part of the Roman Empire. So much so that the Roman Empire ended up becoming Christianized. So anyway, I'm getting off the beaten path here. So in this discipline of theology, we pay attention to what's going on in our own individual spiritual experience. We're looking for clues. But also, we don't only look inward, but we look out into the environment and the universe that we find ourselves in. And so in this area of Christian theology, we have a name for it. It's called cosmology. And it's there in the first line. The area of Christian theology that is concerned with the nature of the universe is called cosmology. From the Greek word cosmos, you've heard cosmos, that means world, and logos, the word as in the study of the world.
Did you get that again? Sorry.
Could we, as an aspect of that, can we go through?
Yeah, why don't we do that? I'm skipping ahead.
I would very much, well, a couple of things I want to throw in.
Okay.
One thing that I wanted to throw in, back to the use of language. in the Greek language.
What page?
I'm on page 6 of the first
Okay.
study guide. It's where I'm gonna go to these different philosophical, theological terms. But before I do that, I wanna mention something else about language, and the Greek language in particular. When the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed in 586, and many of the people, the educated people, the people who had skills, were carried off to Babylon in slavery.
This is the first
Yeah,
temple.
the first temple, for 80 or 90 years that they were there before they were allowed to come back by King Cyrus. What happened when they returned is not all of them returned. And when they were allowed to leave Babylon, some of them spread out, and that's known as the diaspora, the dispersion. And they went to places like Antioch and Rome and Alexandria, Egypt, and some of them did go back to Jerusalem. But some of them stayed in Babylon. So, and once they were in those other regions, just like other immigrants all over the world, when they go into a new area, they wouldn't know the language that people were speaking. And so the kids, of course, would learn the language and would take it home to the parents, you know, and then by the third generation, everybody was speaking the new language. And the grandparents, you were still speaking to in the native language from wherever people came from, which was Hebrew. But the language that the grandkids would be speaking, that to their contemporaries in this new area, wherever they were, was Greek. And that required, eventually, the Jews themselves to translate their own scriptures from Hebrew into Greek. And that document is known as the Septuagint.
Septuagint.
And it comes from the word 70, and there is a tradition that
It comes from the same word that the month September comes from.
and the tradition is that it took 70 Jewish scholars 2 weeks to do the translation, which is an apocryphal story.
Yeah,
But,
that's a made-up story.
But anyway, it's known as the Septuagint, and it's a Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures, and it's the document that the early Jewish Christians used. They used the Septuagint, so when you have early New Testament writers quoting their heritage, they're quoting a translation of their heritage. They're quoting a Greek version of the Hebrew scriptures. And that eventually becomes an issue and something that to be looked at very, very carefully much later down the road, when scholars are starting to translate the scriptures into English.
So it's gone from
Well, it goes from Hebrew into Greek,
to
and then
English or whatever.
Saint Jerome translates everything. The Hebrew scriptures now in Greek, and the New Testament materials, which were written in Greek, into Latin, and that's Saint Jerome did that. And that version is known as the Vulgate. It's in Latin. And
it's still used today.
the Douay Rheims version of the Roman Catholic Bible is an English translation of Jerome's translation, Latin translation of the Bible. So, that all needs to be said, because all of a sudden, when you've got, primarily it was people in England who were starting to do the translating, they want to get the Bible, all of a sudden we've got a printing press, and knowledge of English, of people being able to read, starts to go up astronomically
Yeah, yeah.
because you can get your
Yeah.
hands on
Printed
documents that
Yeah,
you
printed
couldn't
materials,
before because of the printing
It
press.
changed the world.
It changes everything. And so these scholars are starting to translate the Bible from original tongues into English. Well, they discover, lo and behold, that we've got a Hebrew version of some of these texts, and we've also got this Greek and Latin versions, and they start comparing them. And
Can I ask, it confuses me and always has, how so many languages can be used with inner translations.
Mhm.
And it seems that everybody often puts their own
Yes,
thoughts into
that's right.
translation.
Their own spin
Yeah.
to it, pretty much.
Yeah, you never get a pure translation when you're going from one language to another, specifically an ancient language. Now it's easier, I think, to translate Greek and Latin into English because Greek and Latin and English belong to the same
Yeah.
family of languages. But Hebrew is very different.
Yeah.
And I understand, I didn't really take much Hebrew, so I don't know, but it was too intimidating for me.
I would think so, yeah.
so in any event, I think that we need to throw that
Yeah,
into
that's,
the
Yeah,
mix.
yeah.
that's very
It's
interesting.
important.
Yeah,
Very
it's
interesting.
important to
Yeah,
know.
it is.
Mhm.
So,
It's a context.
so now, let's go to page 6 in the first lesson, finally, which leads into the study of cosmology, which is the very next thing
Mhm.
down the road. But I want to run through these different terms.
Okay, yeah.
Theism, well, Bishop Peter, you could do some of this too if you want to.
This is page
Theism.
6
No, I'm
It's on page 6.
Phenomenon of
of
religion.
the handout from today.
No,
No.
the first hand,
We're still on the first
we're,
lesson.
Okay,
first lesson.
all right.
And it's part B, philosophical theological belief systems. The first one is in some ways the most general. It's theism, belief in the existence of one God. And that's pretty straightforward there. What's
Now, usually that belief is characterized by the idea that God is personal.
Could somebody define imminent?
Sure. That a theistic God is viewed as being transcendent to the created order, but separate,
Yeah.
but somehow also in or participating in the world order. That's what eminence
In and of,
in
in,
the world
Um,
order.
So eminence means within,
within.
within,
For example,
yeah. So you're looking at what's within.
The most obvious thing to bring up from my point of view, because it differs so much from the next one down the line, is that if you're a theist, it would be appropriate to believe in miracles. Because God can work in the world and can
Yeah.
do things supernaturally in the world around us that we may not be able to explain through empirical means, but obviously something is happening, is going on. So transcendent and eminent is a theistic view, and historically Judaism, Christianity, and Islam
Yeah.
all fit that bill.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, may I go on down the road? Okay, deism, this is, by the 17th century, 1600s, in Europe, scientific discovery is leading, scholars to the view that you can explain the world around us mechanistically. There are laws of nature. Galileo's idea that the sun is the center of the universe and not the earth, and Newton comes along with laws of motion, and basically the argument for the existence of God that's very popular during this time is called a teleological proof, or an argument from teleology is by design. Something is designed, has a purpose and a design. And so the idea is that God, who is transcendent, creates the world according to these laws of motion and laws of mechanism, just like a watchmaker can make a watch. And if you open up a watch and start looking at it on the inside, you can see all these gears and so on that are making it work the way it works.
So is that correct to say it's the beginning of the scientific method?
It is
Yeah.
within the context
Right.
of the
The scientific method draws on this.
Yes,
All right,
because
okay.
you only look at the created order,
Okay.
and you're assuming that the way you can explain everything is through, I'll use the word empirical, through empirical explanation.
Sensory
By
experience.
using
okay.
sensory experience of your eyes and your ears and so forth. So, the folks who come to be known as deists, which includes Thomas Jefferson
And Ben Franklin.
and Ben Franklin, were deists because they were okay with the idea that God created the world, but just like a watchmaker
Yeah.
who could make a watch
Yeah.
and then let the watch just sort of sit there.
And walk away.
And walk away, and that's what God has done with the universe, with the world, has created this wonderful universe that operates according to the laws of nature, and we have been given intelligence, and so we can figure out what those laws of nature are.
And this God is not sitting around listening to our
No,
prayers.
he's not.
He's completely disinterested.
Yeah, he's not eminent, he's not in the world, just like a watchmaker isn't in
Yeah.
his watch. Everybody following that? So
Yeah.
that idea is still with us. Atheism is on the list, that's easy. An atheist is somebody who doesn't believe in God. A means not here. Polytheism, poly means many, so polytheists would believe that there are many gods, a plurality of gods. And
So we're not referring to poly here. when we say-
No, that's not Paul, not our poly. Pantheism. I'll give you an example of somebody who was a pantheist. Spinoza, who's a philosopher, a Jewish philosopher, who ran into trouble with his synagogue because he came to believe that God and the universe were the same thing, which is not a Jewish belief, because in Judaism, God is a creator God, and then there's the creation. There's a creator and a creation, and Spinoza's claim to fame really is, no, history is wrong, Judaism is wrong, God and the world of nature, exactly the same thing, there's only one, and it's just.
Well, sometimes when I watch on the History Channel a program on science, which I love to watch because I didn't get much science when I went to school, so it's a whole new world for me. But they talk about nature as if nature is a person with intentionality and purpose. Like, nature won't do this, nature creates that. I said, what's the difference between your nature and my God?
So,
Well, I just wanted to make a contribution to this conversation.
So anyway, that's known as pantheism, and then panentheism is a little bit different. It's the claim that God is in the activities of the world. Not the same thing as the activities of the world, but God is in the activities of the world, and that position is known as panentheism. I personally think that there are some indigenous religions that come the closest to holding that point of view. And it's on this page 7, whether as a single God, a number of gods, or other form of cosmic animating force interpenetrates part of the universe and extends beyond it. And I think that's a very accurate understanding of what goes on in panentheism, which is a separate point of view than pantheism. So
Now, of all these different philosophical point of views, theism is where we as Catholics fall. So we would be in that category of theism. But the others are our competitors.
well, and we have seen various Christians at various times flirt with some of these other points of view.
Yeah.
When you just spoke about panentheism, would you say the American Indian kind of?
Yeah, yes,
That's
I
the
wish
impression I'm
that,
Yeah.
I wish Adalia were here tonight.
That would, I think that was their spirituality.
Oftentimes,
that's what I
there's a sun god that's over all the other,
Oh,
all
okay,
the other creatures,
okay.
yeah. So that
Well, we'll
might-
have to
that might-
ask Adelia.
Yeah,
Because they respect nature, they respect
Yeah.
wildlife, they
Yeah.
respect everything, you know. they
I
respect
one time, a Native
Yeah,
American
the
came to
spirit,
our
yeah.
church and he had a bumper sticker on his car that said, "Everything is sacred."
Yeah.
And I thought, that sounds like panentheism.
Mhm.
Panentheism, I never heard that
Okay,
before.
wow.
So
So we got those?
we got those, and then.
Oh, we did that.
and
Do
we-
they have
we-
that?
We did, yes, they've got it.
Oh, good.
Should have it.
No,
The nature, you don't have that? We should get this.
We'll make a copy of it.
We wanna
Yeah,
give you a copy.
because we talked about it already.
Right, we've already talked about it. So should we just take it out of here?
Afterward.
Okay,
I'll give it
you got
to
it.
Sharon.
Okay, and Sharon will go and make sure. So don't leave tonight till you get your copy of this chart
why don't I run
or
that
this
right
diagram.
That would work.
now? And then we won't forget to do it.
Peter, can I just, if this is the right time, I'm in the Walnut Village,
Yes.
which, they have a chaplain.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, and he was a
Lutheran?
Presbyterian, he was Presbyterian.
Oh, okay.
But Walnut Village it was Walnut Manor, and began as a Lutheran.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, and my question is, this is how uneducated I am. They have a Bible study,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering if I should go.
Oh,
Yeah,
Well-
because I don't really know the Catholic Bible very
well, and I think you would find it enjoyable and a good way to learn because it's the same Bible. But I think that as long as you recognize they have a particular way of interpreting the
That's
Bible.
what,
And there's nothing wrong with knowing that, but it forces you to ask the question, well, how do we in the Catholic tradition interpret
interpret
that?
that.
So it's gonna be more work for you, but
Well,
it's
especially
probably
since I
gonna
don't-
be, it'll
Don't
open
have
up
any
the,
background.
but so much of biblical scholarship is shared by everybody,
Yeah,
you know,
well, anyway, it's nice that they're having a Lenten supper
that is,
every Wednesday night.
that's great.
And, I'm glad it's there. I think
Yeah.
it's a good connection, but Anyway, I didn't wanna interrupt,
Well, you didn't, but I think it's good if you pursue that.
yeah.
Because you'll know that you're in getting a Bible study from someone who's not Catholic, but still, the study will have value.
And ecumenical Catholicism
Yeah.
does not really interpret the Bible any differently than Roman Catholicism.
We're pretty much, very much in that Catholic tradition, that frame of mind.
It's just the particular
Yeah,
regulations and.
right, there's,
I just wanna say too, it's been my experience, that Catholics don't read the Bible.
No,
So
no.
you're gonna be in like Flynn anyway you.
yeah, let the priest read the Bible.
If anything sounds hinky, you come back and tell us about it.
Well,
I'm sure Father Peter, Mother Diane straightened you out.
listen to what they said. I'm come with my dissertation. Anyway, thank you.
Well, thanks for that, that was a good conversation.
Well, let me speak to the issue. When the Protestants come along in the 1600s, and Luther in particular, with his sola scriptura, that we're supposed to decide everything based on just on the scriptures and not on tradition, and they were opposed to the bishops and the priests for any number of
Right.
reasons, and they were emphasizing the significance of the Bible that they now had in a German translation, and it was being translated into English also and Luther translated, and then used the printing press to get the text out to people. Part of the issue, which is still with us, is the minute you put the Bible into the hands of the people and just say, go for it, in terms of interpretation, you can come up with just about anything, because people start proof texting and pick and choose passages that they think favor a point of view that they hold. Whereas in Roman Catholicism, there's I'll call them a group called a magisterium that historically have done the interpretation for the rest of the flock. And that was one of the things that led to some books being banned in the Roman Catholic Church, because it didn't match, those views don't match what the magisterium has said, one of which was Galileo's idea that the sun was at the center of the universe rather than the earth. And you know, how many hundreds of years it took before that to be resolved, like in 1994 or something, they finally forgave Galileo. Let him back in. But, I mean, I kid you not, so that, you know, that there really is a distinction to be drawn between historical Roman Catholic interpretation of texts versus Lutheran or Presbyterian or
Well, that's why I'm a
Reformed
little
or
concerned
whatever.
about getting a misconception, since I truly don't know the
Well,
Catholic Bible.
you'll have a good experience, I encourage, you won't get anything too
I
strange
won't
or
really go
wild.
flying off
You
into
know,
it.
maybe if they call attention to something, well, Catholics generally look at this, well, you can verify that from your own experience.
Yeah.
But I think, it sounds like it's a Presbyterian?
no,
Well, that's who this chaplain is. He just left. They had another one,
Oh, okay,
and I don't know. And
well,
the chapel,
that's pretty mainstream Protestant, but it's okay, it's not anything you have to worry about, I don't think.
one of the things you might bring back to us is let us know what version they're
Yeah.
using.
Yeah, that would be
Because
interesting.
in the last 60 or 70 years, especially with the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls and of the Nag Hammadi manuscripts down in Egypt, and all of the discoveries that have been made in terms of ancient texts,
Mhm.
and taking a look at those texts versus what we had as, you know, that we've been using that was much more recent than some of the texts that have been found that are much closer to being monographs. We don't have any of the monographs, which would be the
Oh.
original writing. We don't
Yeah,
have
those
any
are
of
gone.
that. But if you've got something that's only 300 or 400 years old, as opposed to something that's 700 or 800 or 900 years old, you know, and then they compare them, and they're working their translations based on whether or not the text is the same, or has it been changed,
And that's called textual criticism.
and
And it is a specialty in theology.
but
There's guys, that's all they do.
But what I wanna say is that's cross-denominational.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been so much that's been going on, and there's been so much contribution that's gone on in Roman Catholic circles, as well as Episcopal circles, or Presbyterian circles, or whatever, they're Baptist circles for that matter.
Yeah.
And they contribute to trying to reach consensus and agreement on translation.
So, biblical scholarship in our time has become much more of a collaborative, ecumenical
really?
endeavor.
Yeah,
Biblical scholarship.
so
I
that's,
mean, you still have the people on the margins
yeah,
who are fanatical or something,
and
but
have their own version.
Well,
Like-
what version does the Catholic Church?
it's called the NAB, New American
Good
Bible. That's
Okay, that I, yeah.
And that's translated directly from the Greek and Hebrew into English by a board of translators that were Roman Catholic.
Oh, okay.
And it became the official
Uh-huh.
Catholic English version in the United States. And you know something? It's a very good
I
translation.
have a big Bible, and I think
Yeah.
that's what it is.
Well,
It's
then
it's probably that.
you
Yeah.
may see it as NABE, which means edition, or, you know, New American Bible,
Yeah, New American
Thank
Bible.
you, that's helpful.
edition or version, or whatever you want.
What happened to there was something called
Jerusalem.
Dewey,
Yeah, it's
That's
still
still
there,
around.
it's still around.
still
But
legitimate?
it's not used.
It's
Been displaced by the American
I don't
Bible.
even
Yeah,
remember
it's-
that where it came
It's
from, it's just,
an English translation of Jerome's Vulgate,
Yeah.
and it was the official Roman Catholic version in English for a long
Yeah.
time. But it has been superseded
okay, thank you, okay,
by this other one.
Yeah.
NA,
The
And-
NAB, which came out like in 1970.
NAB, the
There
American
is,
Snack
there
Crackers
is an
Church,
ecumenical
NCC.
Bible that the Roman Catholics allow, which is the new, is the Revised Standard Version.
Oh, yeah.
The new Revised Standard Version of the Bible, which, is legit from a Roman Catholic point of view, as well as the Episcopalians use it, and other Protestants use it too.
New revised, what is
The new Revised Standard
it?
Version.
I was gonna say something. There is on the website, there's a website called Bible Gateway. And on Bible Gateway, it's worth going to that website because it has every translation available.
Oh,
And it lists them and you can look.
Yep.
And you can look up a particular verse and compare, yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
that would be
and Bible
helpful,
Gateway,
yeah.
it's a great, I was amazed at the resource.
Yeah.
All there at the computer, and you can get
Get all kinds of.
information on a word that is used in the text. Oh, it's very user-friendly, I recall.
And troublesome passages, you can see,
Oh.
the variety of translations
Yeah.
that are available. Again, we've run out of time.
Oh, okay. It's been a good class tonight. Thank you for coming. I'm glad you're here.
So would you bless us, please?
What's that?
Would you bless us?
Oh, I would be happy to do that. Peace be with you.
And
also with
you.
Let us pray together. Loving God, we are grateful to be able to be together as community tonight and to study these sacred mysteries. We ask you to continue the work that you've begun in our hearts and minds, and may we be conformed more and more into the image of your Son, Jesus, who who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever.
Amen.
The Lord be with you.
And also with
May Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.